Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Texas, we have Kelly Holt. Kelly is the co-founder and former executive director of Barnes Sanctuary. She is a passionate advocate for nonprofit work and specifically animal rights, environmental conservation, and social justice. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. Let's start with how and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
Yeah, so I became a vegetarian when I was really young. I think I was 14 or 15. I found out about what happens to chickens on large factory farms and all of the health implications that go along with raising animals and that kind of confinement and in that kind of industrial way. And it didn't take much, even at a young age, for me to realize like this is not something that I want to participate in. And there was nobody else in my family, who was vegetarian at the time. But I did it anyways. And then it took many years before I transitioned to a fully vegan diet. That I did that in 2015-ish, so about 6 years ago. And the transition to vegan was so simple for me. It was, I was already used to, leaving animals off of my plate for so many years. And so I was primed and ready for the kind of vegan messaging that's out there. And I just watched the right video and it just clicked. And that was it. And so that was about 6 years ago.
What was that video?
It was Gary Yourofsky's speech. It was making the rounds on YouTube, and somebody sent it to me and I watched it. And I really appreciate sort of, a straightforward, matter-of-fact approach to activism. And that's exactly what he did. He just kind of laid out the facts and it just clicked for me. And I agreed with everything he said. And I was really excited after I watched the video to go vegan. I was excited to go out and eat, and I was excited to tell people about my decision and why I made the decision. I felt really informed. So yeah, it was just the one video. And I feel like it could have happened at any point in time if the information just would have been delivered to me like it was in his speech.
Now, when you went out and told your message to other people, how did they react?
Yeah, I actually have a story. The day I went vegan, I was seeing somebody at the time and I was really excited. I told him my decision and we went out to an Italian restaurant in Austin that night. And I was excited to call ahead and to see their menu and make sure, they have some options I could veganize. And I went and talked to the waiter there, the server there, and he made sure that the chefs prepared the dish vegan with olive oil instead of butter. And I sat my partner down and I told him, here are all of the reasons why I'm making this decision. And I said, I'm not telling you all of this so that I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to persuade you one way or another. But, as my significant other, I do expect you to be able to respect my decision and understand why I made it, and, be able to advocate on behalf of me if there is ever a need to. And he actually ended up kind of doing his own research afterwards on some of the things we discussed. And then went vegan himself not long after, and he was actually eating meat at the time, so he wasn't as familiar with eating vegetarian even.
So you just changed your significant other at the time to becoming vegan?
Yeah, and it wasn't really my intention to do that. I just kind of laid out the information and asked him to understand, why I'm making the decisions I do. And he came to that conclusion on his own, which I think is really, really important. People really have to come to these conclusions on their own to feel confident about making these changes.
So do you feel that's the best way to influence other people, is to just kind of lay out the facts and let them get there themselves?
Yeah, in some ways. I think that different people respond to different messages. And that's kind of what I've discovered throughout my life, just being a vegetarian at first, and then initially a vegan, and then actually doing advocacy work in the animal rights world. I think it I think it varies per person. Some people are really primed like I was and ready for for sort of the harsher, more matter of fact information. And then other folks are not ready to see that. They kind of know on some level that that's happening, but they don't want to see it. And so they might be more prone to entering into this awareness through something that's a little bit more approachable, like healthy eating or vegan chefs or sanctuary work, and sort of that's sort of a more approachable space for certain folks. So I think it really depends. I think everybody's different, and I like to ask people whenever I meet them if they are already vegan, sort of why they initially became vegan. And very few people say that they became vegan for the animals. A lot of people I've noticed have come at this from health reasons, from environmental reasons. I actually met somebody recently who now works for animal equality, and he said, initially he started looking into it because, and this is a funny circumstance, the only one I've heard of, where he said, he came at it from sort of the social, almost like a feminism lens. So he became more aware of, feminist issues, and then found out about dairy, and that's how he became a vegan, which is really unusual. But I loved that story.
Now, animal rights seems to be a feminist issue. What
Mhm.
is it that most people don't seem to associate animal rights with feminism?
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks, they see animal rights as in a bubble, in like its own sphere, and it's just about the animals. I mean, I think there are women who are very viscerally affected by what happens on dairy farms, because the mothers are impregnated over and over. Their babies are taken from them. Their milk is bottled to sell for people. This
Hmm.
It's a really terrible process. And I think mothers in particular are really emotionally responsive to watching something like that happen, especially because cows carry their babies for such long terms, just like humans do.
Hmm.
And we're all aware that animals have these similar emotional capacity to feel pain and love and attachment, and so there's a lot of ways to sort of relate feminist issues about owning power over our own bodies, having autonomy, being able to raise our young and develop like these emotional bonds, like that. Those are things that transfer over to mothers of all species. And I think there are lots of similar veins about oppression and feminism that can be applied to the farmed animals, that we're hoping to protect.
Now, when you changed to becoming vegan, did you notice any positive changes, either mentally or physically?
Yeah, I wish I could say that I noticed more physically. That wasn't the case with me. I don't think I paid attention to it. I think, for me it was really an ethical decision, and what it did for me was slightly different. I feel like at that point in my life I was working for startup technology companies in Austin, and I was doing marketing work, and there wasn't there was something off in my life. It just I wanted to be doing more with my time,
Hmm.
and I didn't really know what that was or what that would be. And when I went vegan, I did it for ethical reasons. I did it for the animals, but it sort of started this domino effect, and I started making more and more decisions that were aligned with my ethics and my beliefs and my values. And ultimately I became a much better person for it, and a much more confident person. I'm living a different life now. I ended up, a year after I became vegan, I ended up entirely switching my career
Hmm.
and moving into the nonprofit space, helping found a sanctuary, for animals. And now now I'm leading a different life. And I look back and I didn't realize it at the time, but those small steps you make towards, living with integrity, like for me, that made a huge difference. It transformed my life.
Now, you wrote something recently on Instagram that I read. It says, my core values began to root into my daily life and it transformed everything.
Hmm.
What do you mean by that statement? What changed?
Yeah, so the little steps like becoming vegan, sort of looking at the world through the lens of, how do I dedicate more of my time to the things, to the causes and values that I believe in and that I hold. It inspired me, one. It gave me a sense of purpose. It developed passion where there was restlessness, and
Mm-hmm.
and so on a day-to-day basis, it just made me a happier person living a more purposeful life. And it gave me something to be proud of and confident about. And it makes a big difference. Like those little changes, they make a big difference with everything from how you see yourself to how you live your life. And that was the case with me. I have definitely changed over the past 6-7 years as a person, and I like who I am so much more now.
Can you give us an example
of
of how you see yourself differently?
Sure. Yeah, I feel when I look at myself now I have a purpose and I feel confident. I feel more confident and I feel more proud of myself. And and I understand what I want to be doing. And there's so much power in that. It's an empowering feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And before, I was always it felt like I was searching for something. And it can be really debilitating and confusing when you're searching for something and you don't know what it is. I remember going to like a professional counselor kind of trying to figure out, what do I really want to be doing? And it wasn't some grand epiphany like, yes, I want to be part of the animal rights movement. I want to be helping rescue animals and caring for them. Like that wasn't one grand epiphany. It was just a matter of taking small steps in the direction of like my values and my interests, and sort of turning my lens from how do I make the most of right now to how do I better serve the causes I care about, and where's the need for my skills and expertise in those causes.
When you started to become vegetarian, you were how old?
14 or 15.
Was that difficult as far as like your parents or friends?
Yeah, it was. It was difficult only because, I was only, I think I knew one other person who was a vegetarian. It was a good friend of mine who was a vegetarian as well. But
Hmm.
my family didn't understand it. They rolled with it. They were accommodating. But yeah, it was, there was a lot of being made fun of that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I was people kind of picking at my beliefs, trying to understand why I made that decision, and then not always being accommodating at the time. Like there weren't that many vegetarians that I knew, and I grew up overseas as well. So in Venezuela, that's where I spent some of my youth, and I moved there after I became a vegetarian. And Latin America, there are so many meat heavy cultures, and in Venezuela, I don't think they even, when I would tell people I was a vegetarian, I don't think they understood entirely.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, "Oh, so do you want fish then, or you want chicken?" And I'm like, "No, no meat." So I don't, I don't think it was. I think it was just strange, and I really had to develop at a young age a stronger sense of pride in my identity, and I had to learn kind of how to stand up for myself and voice my opinions and sort of defend my beliefs, and learn how to just be different, you know,
Yeah.
which I think ultimately was a really valuable experience.
Yeah, I think that would have been pretty difficult dealing with that in a different country.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Now, when you became vegan, you said you didn't struggle really with anything, but did cheese have any effect on you?
Yeah, it was an easy decision and I was really excited about it. But there were some difficulties in just giving up a few dishes and things that I was just used to eating. So cheese, like queso was one of them. I'm sorry to say now, looking back, I hate to say it, but I was so used to it at the time that that was definitely kind of a tough thing to initially give up. But after a while, your taste buds change and you start to look at things differently. And now I look at queso and it's like, oh, I'm glad I don't put that in my body anymore. But at the time, it's giving up things that you're used to. So there is a transition period, and I think just trying to be graceful and forgiving with yourself. I think those are important things to keep in mind.
What did you learn from that struggle of dealing with things like cheese and queso, and how did you overcome it?
I continued to learn about the issues that caused me to go vegan to begin with. So instead of just kind of making the quick decision and then forgetting about it, I continued to look into it. I continued to watch videos, sort of expand my awareness. Continuing that process of learning, I think, is really important and helpful. It's encouraging as well. It's just encouraging, from the perspective of I'm doing the right thing. But it's also just necessary, I think, if you care about something enough to make a swift and great life change. I think it's important that you continue to research it and grow your knowledge and awareness around the topic.
Now, was there anything holding you back from becoming vegan? You were vegetarian for a long time.
Yeah. I think the only thing was that as a vegetarian, I thought that I was doing enough
Hmm.
and I didn't know the rest of it. I didn't know the rest of the story about eggs and dairy. And I thought, being vegetarian, I was making enough of an impact. And so, I was thankful to the kind of activism that Gary Yourofsky was doing at the time, because that is exactly what I needed as a vegetarian, a longtime vegetarian, is to be reminded that I don't know everything yet and that I need to continue my own education and understand that there's still more I can do.
Now, let's get to Barn Sanctuary.
Yeah,
What are some of the lessons that you learned at Barn Sanctuary?
there are so many. I I initially wanted to uh, before I decided to do Barn Sanctuary full time with Dan, who's the other founder. It's Dan, his father, and I kind of co-founded the sanctuary.
Hmm.
Um, I already at that point knew that I wanted to do cause-based work, but I had initially thought, okay, I'm going to create an accelerator program for nonprofits where we get them all of the resources. We can identify all the high potential impact nonprofits and get them all the resources that they need to sort of start up and
Hmm.
to grow a sustainable nonprofit. And I realized that I just didn't know enough about nonprofits.
Hmm.
And so starting the sanctuary, one, it really taught me so much about nonprofits, how they operate, how you can grow one, how they're different from for profits, why they are effective. And then on the flip side, I learned a lot about the farm animal advocacy world, which I was just a new vegan, and there's so much passion and interest as a new vegan and the topic of farm animal advocacy, but you learn so much more about the nuances involved in that kind of advocacy work and how to better show up as an advocate. And so that was a really important lesson for me. I think it's important to consider the nuances and how you communicate and your approach to storytelling, because kind of coming full circle back to that concept we were talking about before, about how to reach, wide and diverse audiences of people. We cannot present, to the entire world one single message from one single perspective. We need to be able to really touch people wherever they are at in their journey of awareness, and be able to communicate, on multiple levels with people in different places of life and awareness. And so it was an interesting process of sort of understanding how to be an effective advocate for animals, and then also how to do the hands-on care and rescue work, and how to balance, your passion for advocacy and changing the world with, the work right in front of you with the animals who need you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's so many lessons, truly, so many.
Can you take us back to the moment that you guys decided to start Barn Sanctuary?
Yeah. So it was I think at the time, Dan was reading Gene Bauer's book, Living the Farm Sanctuary Life, and he had just recently gone vegan, and so he was really inspired by Gene Bauer's journey, and his dad called him up and said, hey, we're thinking about potentially selling the family property, and I don't think we want to do that, and we're just kind of asking all of the kids, what do you want to do with the same? Do you have any good ideas about how to utilize the land? And it was just the perfect timing, like the stars aligned. Dan was like, actually, I do have an idea. I just read this book, and Dan is really quick on ideas, so he was already like, okay, yes, let's do it. Tom was like, oh, that's an interesting idea, and Dan's like, okay, I already got a nonprofit license, and we're gonna do this. And so Dan and I, we were partners at the time, and so he was telling, he would tell me about all of these ideas, and I kind of thought initially, I was like, well, he doesn't really know anything about running a sanctuary. Like, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. And it did. He was fully committed. And so I helped him. We worked on building a strategic plan to get some initial funding to be able to move there and start it. And so I kind of decided personally that, this is the most logical next step for me. Like, I want to dedicate my time to nonprofits. I want to, I care about the animal cause. I want to do this. And I left my high-paying tech job to sort of take a 50% salary cut and just start something new in a different state in the nonprofit space. None of that, it seemed scary, but none of that seemed questionable. It was just, this is happening because this is what needs to happen. It was a very strange thing how it all just kind of came together. We were all on the same page, and we just wanted to do this.
You're sitting there and Dan's on the phone with his dad or whatever, and all of a sudden you're just like, let's just start a sanctuary. Is that basically what happened? And you just guys were like, okay, let's run with it and let's make it happen.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Honestly,
you didn't have any second thoughts at all, ever?
Well, I did question, I felt scared.
Yeah.
I felt scared moving. I felt scared leaving, my family and friends here, and my, job here. But I didn't, it wasn't really a question in my mind, even though it was scary. And I was used to working in startup environments. So I'm used to growing things from the ground up. I am used to challenging work environments. I'm used to starting at a base level and believing that there's, potential and opportunity in the future, and really putting everything I have into building that. So it was exciting and scary, and it was just the most logical next step. Almost, maybe not logical, maybe it was just the most intuitive next step.
Now, how did you feel when that happened? When you guys actually got to the sanctuary and you were like, okay, go.
It felt it felt interesting. We were kind of getting our footing, and I felt, I mean, I don't, I don't know. It just felt normal. It felt like, okay, we're doing this. We're committed. We're here. And then, at that time, we had also rescued our first two rescues, Cora and Henry, in the fall of 2016. Before we had moved up there, Tom was just kind of caring for them, because we had already done that rescue, and we had just gotten our website up, had just started accepting donations. We were still doing this, remotely, and Tom was caring for the animals there. And so when we moved up, we already had two rescues to care for, and it was just beautiful. Like, in the beginning stages of starting a sanctuary, you have time on your hands to just spend with the animals and think about, the future and how you want to shape it. And there were a lot of really beautiful moments, kind of learning how to exist among farmed animals in a sanctuary environment. I wasn't used to being around farmed animals. And so I got to play with, Cora and Henry when they were calves, and sort of learn their personalities and learn how to interact with them and how to care for them. And so the whole first few years were just beautiful learning experiences, and some really tough growing challenges. Barn Sanctuary grew. Dan and I are both, we both have the tech background. We both knew how to start something up quickly and scale it. And we did that with Barn, but there are a lot of challenges that come with growing that quickly. And so we were faced with a lot of challenges initially, like internal nonprofit growing pains.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah. We had to kind of keep up with how quickly we were growing. So we would basically just, it was on multiple different levels. So we would rescue animals, and then we would need a volunteer program, and we'd need to build out the volunteer program. And then, we would have to follow up with our donors, like our current existing donors. We wanted to scale our social media, but then we also needed to make sure that we were constantly creating content. And then we started hiring staff, because we reached that capacity, but we didn't have any internal structures. And so it was, a process of kind of figuring out how to manage all of it. And we did hit a lot of rocky challenges, because we just, there's only so many hours in a day. Mm-hmm. But, I think that's almost, when you grow that quickly, I think a lot of what we went through is to be expected. And it was a great learning experience to go through it. And I do think there are some inherent challenges in running a sanctuary, things that like almost every sanctuary probably deals with. And so we eventually learned how important it is to really get involved in the bigger sanctuary community and rely on the expertise of people who have been doing this work for much, much longer than we have, mm-hmm. and learning from them. And that was really incredibly important and so helpful. I'm so grateful for the sanctuary community, because there's so many beautiful, helpful people just wanting to make sure that, it's wanting to make sure that other sanctuaries can succeed too.
What are some of the reasons Barn Sanctuary was so successful?
Oh, yeah. I think Dan and I both brought a lot of unique skills from our tech backgrounds, and I think Tom, Dan, and I all sort of had our own unique expertise and skill sets that we brought to the table that really complemented each other. And then we had so many people join the team and join our volunteer base who were really enthusiastic and really committed. And that helped us a lot in the beginning. And I think, Dan is also just a very charismatic, relatable face and personality. Mm-hmm. And, it was really great having him sort of be the face of the organization and be going on this journey of learning about farmed animals himself, while we were sharing that with the public, hoping that they would begin their journey of learning about farmed animals. So it was kind of this beautiful come along with us content that we were promoting and posting. And I think, we were all just really committed. We were very committed to making this work. We all cared a lot, and you have to. It's hard. So yeah, I think it's a combination of many things. Timing, the people involved, and the community we created.
How can other sanctuaries copy some of the successes that you had at Barn?
Well, I don't know that everybody should. I think what's unique, that what I appreciate about the sanctuary world, is that not every sanctuary operates the same way. There are many different, sanctuary philosophies. So some people, they run highly ethical sanctuaries. They don't want to be, providing too many tours or even any tours. They really just want to provide a safe haven for the animals. And then there are some sanctuaries that really build out their educational programs and believe like that's the unique part of running the sanctuary that they want to bring to the world is, the programmatic side of things. There are different ways to run it. Some sanctuaries are very small. Some want to scale to the size of, farm sanctuary, really big one. So I think it's important if you are starting a sanctuary, for anybody who's starting, to really get clear on what you want your vision to be and what your mission is. You can copy the mission and vision of other sanctuaries. But, I think it's important to remember that it's good to be unique. It's good to do things differently. And I would just say, for the sake of, fundraising and marketing communications work, that, just either bring somebody on as a volunteer who can help with it, or familiarize yourself with how to use social media. And storytelling is so important. That's the one thing any sanctuary has at their disposal, are like just really heartfelt, moving, beautiful stories that can touch anybody's heart. Even if they eat meat, anybody can get on board with rescuing a farm animal who has been abused or neglected, and opening their heart up to that animal's story might, and has in many cases, opened up their mind to hear sort of what those sort of bigger industrial issues are that affect all farmed animals. That's the power of sanctuary. There's so much opportunity there. I would just recommend kind of figuring out what their unique approach is going to be.
You invested so much energy into Barn, and you've left your role as the executive director.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get the courage to start a whole new project after investing so much energy into Barn?
I don't know. I get really excited by challenges and new projects, and it was actually never my intention to create Barn for my own sake. I never wanted it to be my future. I wanted to build something beautiful, and I wanted to see our vision through. I wanted to create a financially stable organization that would live on long after I do, and then move on to whatever that next project will be. And that's kind of the space I'm in now. Is I have a few opportunities, and I really would like to stay within the animal welfare and rights movement. I still think there's so much work to be done, and it's a passion of mine, and I'm still fully committed to it. But I have thought about starting my own consulting agency to help many more nonprofits kind of scale their marketing and communications. And so that's a really exciting prospect for me. And it is a little scary, but there's always fear involved in new projects. But I'm also really curious about the companion animal shelter world. I think there's a good amount of traffic, it seems like, from people who work in companion animal work into the farm animal work. And I'm wondering if the same is reversed, There are folks who advocate for farmed animals who are interested in getting involved in companion animal work, because there's a lot of potential value that I see in that. Because there's seems to be a bit of a division in terms of, there's a focus on, when it comes to like wildlife or companion animals or farmed animals, it's almost like they exist in different spheres a little bit right now.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much inherent overlap, and I'm wondering kind of how we could potentially expand everybody's work to include each other more.
What is one thing that's exciting you in your life right now?
I just started volunteering for Austin Farm Sanctuary. And that is really exciting to me, because the one thing I miss the most about Barn Sanctuary is being around farmed animals. They're an absolute joy. And so I'm really excited to be involved as a volunteer at Austin Farm Sanctuary now. And I'm looking forward to starting up with consulting and getting involved in different projects, a variety of different projects. I really want to participate as much as possible in building the world I want to see.
What is one habit, hack, or tip that helps you stay on track with your plant-based diet?
Yeah, it's not too hard for me to stay on track. I think I will say one thing I started paying more attention to is sort of my nutrient intake, because I find it really fascinating. And so I've started using an app called Chronometer.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that to sort of track what foods give me what nutrients. It's just a little interest of mine. So I've started doing that. I like it because it kind of intrigues. It makes me interested in trying different kinds of foods. I did get into the habit of sort of eating the same meals, and so now I'm experimenting more, and I think that is fun. Experimenting with different foods and kind of seeing what nutrients exists in different dishes. That's kind of giving me some inspired fuel right now.
What is some of the stuff you're experimenting with, like kale? Just kidding. Just kidding.
No, I'm experimenting with different dishes. Like last night, I made a chickpea zucchini tagine dish, and it's like a North African sort of spice flavor, and yeah, and then I've started eating more edamame. Just kind of adding different foods into my diet, and trying different flavor combinations.
What cookbook book have you gifted to someone transitioning to a plant-based diet?
I haven't gifted a cookbook, but I usually send either accounts, social media accounts of different chefs, or I will send, recipes that I find on blogs. For a while, I really liked The Minimalist Baker. Yeah, it was many years ago. I really like The First Mess. She's a Canadian chef, and she posts a lot of really interesting but healthy dishes.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like her dishes. And then most recently, I found somebody on Instagram. I think his handle is the Mississippi Vegan.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes some incredible dishes that I just wouldn't even think about making. And it just gets those creative juices flowing, and it makes you think, okay, well, anything's possible. So I usually send things like that to, or just to people who are interested in trying different plant-based foods. I find that a lot of people who are afraid of transitioning to a vegan diet just don't know what to eat. And so I like to show them that there are infinite options, but if they want simple stuff, here are some simple recipes I use.
Now, finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan, and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Yeah. I think before, I was restless, confused, and now I feel purposeful and passionate.
So restless, confused, and purposeful and passionate.
Yeah.
I like that. Such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What's the best way for people to follow you on Instagram, the web, on social media in general?
Yeah, I would say I'm most active on my Instagram account. And that's, you can find me at Anika, Anika Holt, Holt. And I like to remain pretty active on Instagram, but I don't keep up with many other personally, many other social networks.
All right. Thank you again for being on Plant Your Seed.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.